Hi, I'm Marty Rasmussen with Action Coach, and I am just super pleased to be able to be a part of this conversation, this interview with my new friend Brian Simons in the Twin Cities. And Brian comes to us with a very fascinating business and business model, but also a very fascinating background. And so I want to introduce Brian to the show, and I believe the audience is going to have a real thrill to be able to hear about your story. So Brian, thanks for joining us.
No, delighted to be here, Marty. What can I tell you?
Well, in looking at your background, you and I have some things in common, not just geographically, but with history in Arizona and that type of thing, as well as the Twin Cities, but really being kind of big corporate guys that have made a move into the entrepreneurial world. And your story is a fascinating one because you've done really big deals in big positions in your corporate role, and you've also done some big deals in your entrepreneurial role. And so one of the things I think would be really helpful for the audience would be to hear a little bit more about that. I mean, how did you kind of tell us a little bit about kind of your early days, where you started, and then maybe we'll transition to where you are now.
Yeah, my background, I do think is an interesting one. It's as most people are, it's a non-linear journey. Usually when I talk to people about career path, it never goes from A to B. It never goes as planned. And my career has been no different. When I got educated early on, I studied international finance, thinking I was going to go into that realm, maybe some investment banking or the, corporate finance world or something like this. But that quickly got derailed. I just found that line of work to be a little slow and boring, in all candor.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened with me is about a year into my career, a job opened in a warehouse, an hourly job. I took it and I just fell in love with it. I'm not sure if it was the physicality of it or the proximity to the customer or whatever, but really quickly I realized, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to have, I want to be close to feedback. I want to be close to actually executing on things and close to the operation of a business. And so, that's what I've been doing basically my entire career. And as you said, I spent the first probably 15 or 18 years of my career at big Fortune 500 companies. That's where I really learned. My scope of responsibility kind of grew steadily during those years. And I picked up a lot of knowledge, mentoring, and qualifications. I did a Six Sigma Black Belt. I did a Lean Expert Cert. I came across 3 or 4 bosses that I would just consider to be outstanding, that helped me compress my cycles of learning, which you can often do through the experience of others, and not spend years picking up on those skills that you might pick up in the middle or later of your career. And so then, I took a leap for a few years and worked in some PE-owned firms as a chief operating officer. And that wasn't a great fit for me. Culture, pace, civility. And, so I reached a point in my career, which was about 6 years ago now, where I just couldn't get certain problems solved, frankly. So big budgets, a lot of, support and bureaucracy. And there were certain core elements of operations that I just couldn't get to the answers to. And that's how really my journey started as an entrepreneur. So it was kind of, you read it a lot, if you're solving a problem, your product is going to be a valuable one. And that's really where my journey started. So, there were a host of problems that I just couldn't solve. I felt like, I had the wherewithal and the interest in doing it. And if I could just go build my own sort of agile and innovative organization, I could get to those solutions, and then those solutions would create value in the market and create its own revenue stream. And so that's how I got going down the path. And what I often tell customers when I'm talking to them is that our business was really born from about 20 years of pain and suffering in my career. And I really mean that, because, you're under all these pressures around cost, around service, around culture, and all these different things. And in a lot of cases where you have really big questions to answer, the solutions are smaller, and you just need to get to the small solutions to answer the big ones. So anyway, that's the story of my career. It's been nonlinear. It's been really exciting, and There's not a day of it that I regret at this point.
Oh, that's great to hear. There's been times where I've looked back on my career and I thought, man, I've had kind of a wild ride. It's not that linear path that you were describing, and I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one that hasn't had that. But boy, you've got some, these firms that you worked for. Looking at your bio and just talking with you earlier, I mean, you've got some street cred too. I mean, in terms of some of your accomplishments. I mean, both looks like both in big companies and in little companies, and to me, that's really impressive. Is there one project or one initiative that you kind of think really is kind of the hallmark of your career, whether it be, in the entrepreneurial space the past few years or even before that you think others might benefit from hearing about?
Yeah, there's a few, and that's really how you build upward mobility at big companies. You got to hit some home runs, and you got to do it in big games per se. And so there's been a few of those for me. And also what I would say too about these big companies, I mean, my first 15 years were spent at Honeywell and United Technologies. And one of the things you learn by working at companies like that, and there are quite a few of them, is that the mystique of a world-class company kind of melts away, and you see all the warts too, So when you see a world-class company from the inside, you're no longer fascinated by, what is it like to work at Apple or Tesla or any of these famous firms out there that add up to a lot of equity on your resume. I mean, you see it. There's bad people, there's bad processes, there's good people and great processes, great products. But what it is not is perfect and amazing and all those things. It's just like any other job. And so I think that was a big part of my experience. But as far as big projects, one of the great ones in my career was actually a divestiture we did at Honeywell. This is probably 10 or 15 years ago now. And this was sort of my first chance on the big stage, really, where Honeywell was out right before the financial crash in 2008. Trying to divest a piece of its business. It was $1 billion deal, and I ended up as a part of the team that made it happen. We did it very quickly under the watchful eye of the CEO, and lo and behold, 6 months later, I got a great promotion to own logistics for all of Honeywell, and that promotion came because of that output. And I'll never forget, I was over in the UK doing some work on the job I was in at that time, and I got a call. We booked a flight for you from Heathrow to New York. There'll be a car at the airport, and we need you in over the weekend to close this deal before the opening bell on Monday morning. And that's exactly how it went. And it was just one of those amazing experiences where we went into the negotiating room. We were there till 3 or 4 in the morning, came back, on Saturday, same story. We were there till the wee hours, and we were literally there until about 7 a.m. on Monday morning. Finished the deal. Me and my colleagues were at the Newark airport, literally falling asleep on one another, waiting for our flight home. And it just turned out to be one of the great wins of my career. Big stage, big powerful audience, and a great result. So it was good stuff.
Well, that I mean, like I said, you've definitely got street cred, and a project like that. I mean, that's fantastic, and so congratulations, and thanks for sharing it. So that talks kind of the big company experience. A lot of the people in our audience today, though, are maybe not. They may have had experiences similar to that, but many of them are just kind of business owners that have chosen that path, maybe from the beginning or in the past few years. Tell us a little bit about where you are now. I mean, great history, but let's tell the audience a little bit more about where you are right now.
Yeah, so if we fast forward to today, I've got a business. It's called Janus Logistics Technologies, and it's really focused on a specific part of the supply chain. It's more of a functional business rather than aimed at a vertical like aerospace or healthcare or something like this. And where we focus is on a component of the global supply chain called service parts logistics or spare parts logistics, where our clients have distributed networks of inventory. And generally speaking, they need same-day delivery of some sort of an asset. So this could be a company that has service technicians that needs inventory to support a really aggressive service level agreement. or it could be a very Amazon-like supply chain where people are ordering things and they need it today. They need it before the sun goes down. And in all of those cases, you need to deploy inventory very close to the demand. And so that's where service parts logistics comes into play. So today, our core product is really aimed at that. And it's been a tough journey, quite frankly, because when you first start a business, even with a network coming out of big companies like you and I have talked about, it's really difficult to get customers to take the leap with you. One of my learnings early on is there's a big gap between the concept of credibility and the concept of capability. And what I found was big companies with big logos, they have credibility, but they often don't have capability. And, when your iPhone breaks or, an airline is late or something like this, people often write it off, but they continue buying those products, As an entrepreneur, you don't get that benefit. So when you mess up once, people are done with you, or they just won't even give you a try. And so what we spent the early years doing is building relationships and revenue relationships where we could work on our own credibility while we're trying to pay the bills and grow the business. And so that was really the first, literally 3 or 4 years. We plowed right through COVID, which was a lot of fun because a lot of people were just hunkering down and trying to save money and things like this. And so where we are today is really the outcome of that hard work. And I often believe that people in general, you find values through hardship, and we've had our share of hardship where, we're not out having company parties at the end of the year. We're not traveling first class. We're not doing anything like this. And now we've reached a stable place where we're generating enough revenue and earnings that we're a stable business. And we're in growth mode now, which is something that to me is a great achievement because once you get past the notion of how do I pay the rent, you can start to get into, how do I create value? How do I make investments? How do I grow our portfolio? Things like this. And so that's really where we're at today. It's really been an interesting journey.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the transparency because, I think a lot of times, the business owners that I deal with every day, sometimes they look at other business owners and say, man, I sure wish my life was as easy as theirs, right? Or why is mine so challenging? And why am I not getting the results that I envisioned that I had? But I think what you just described is really more the norm than it is the exception, right? I mean, one question on that is, so are you a logistics company or a technology solution company? I mean, how would I categorize you?
Yeah, this is the famous question. You've asked the perfect question, Marty. So I would argue that our business is a tech business, but we really we sort of play both sides of that coin because we offer third-party logistics services. But the core of what we do is technology, and that's how we provide the value proposition. We take a lot of labor out of the process. Our inventory accuracy is through the roof. We have a transportation solution that's really sexy and productive for the client. We have a planning and forecasting solution that's really powerful and innovative. And so, it's almost a tale of two companies because we're either a 3PL masquerading as a tech firm or a tech firm masquerading as a 3PL. And I would argue that we're tech core. And then, we play the 3PL game because we have built the business on 3PL processes and products, but all those things are enabled by technology. And that's really what makes us different.
Fascinating. Yeah. I mean, you have to have the technology to do it. And even logistics today, when people think, is it marine, inland marine? Is it, water marine? Is it shipping containers? Is it packages from Amazon? Those types of things. It's all that stuff that we deal with every day that we take for granted. And I know that can't be done without, significant technology. So it sounds like you're really filling a very important role and important space. But where do you see it going then? I mean, if you look into your crystal ball, if you want to call it that, in the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see your business in particular going, and how might other business owners learn from that?
Yeah, it's a question I think about every day, by the way. So I think when you own a business, there's a sort of a compass that's out there some number of years, and it helps you architect the decisions of today based on where you're trying to go in that horizon you just asked me about. So as I think about it, our business, like I said, we're moving into that hopefully hockey stick growth trajectory where
Mhm.
we really have a meaningful impact on the industry. And even though we're focused on quote unquote a relatively small component of logistics, our market space is worth 50 or 60 billion a year in revenue. And we believe that there are two things that are available to us. First of all, is explosive growth because our service offering, our economics, and again, back to capability is it's really different from what other people are doing in the industry and what I would consider to be a relatively slowly innovative industry. And then secondly, we've partnered with some really powerful firms, and that gives us the ability to make real transformational impacts on the industry. So our largest client today is actually FedEx. We
Wow.
collaborate with them all the time on innovative projects like this transportation network I just mentioned. We built a really sort of technically advanced AI-driven decision model that controls a lot of their deliveries today.
Hmm.
And it does it in a way that makes the market more efficient, right? So this isn't about how much did it cost me to deliver that package, or am I going to get my Amazon order by 5 o'clock? It's deeper than that, and these are the kinds of impacts we're trying to make. So I think those two things are really where I see this thing going over the next 3 to 5 years, which is really explosive growth because people are just accepting, inquiring, and ultimately buying more from us every year. And then secondly, I think we're going to have a really revolutionary and innovative impact on the industry. And I think those two things add up to what we're all about here and what we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the vision. I mean, your market 50 to 60 billion. You've got at least one big name brand that you're working with and getting great results with, and that all goes well to kind of propelling you to the future. So one of the things that I'm curious about, and I think the people online are too, is there, if reflecting back on all of this, is there one or two things, whether they be best practices or maybe learning experiences, when you look back over your life that you could share or be willing to share with others that may help them get that hockey stick growth earlier, simply because you shared some key learnings with them?
Yeah, there's so many, right? So if we had like 3 or 4 hours, we could talk about a lot of different things. In my mind, there's a couple of things that I think are really critical. I mean, first of all, this entrepreneurial journey is different than what people think from the outside. That's the first thing. So if you start a business and you think it's 90 days of work, and then all of a sudden there's big paychecks and fame and glory, and you're on the beach on your private island after that, you're mistaken. You're greatly mistaken if you think that's what the process is. It's if you look at championship athletes out there that are at the pinnacle, they've won the Super Bowl or they've won the World Series or something like this, all you see is that one glorious moment. But leading up to that moment are years and years of blood, sweat, and tears, and oftentimes suffering. And I think entrepreneurship, that's a big
Hmm.
part of it. Some days you're just putting one foot in front of the other. Other days you're swinging for a home run. Still other days you're just trying to be a good friend or spouse or brother or father or whatever, very simple things, because there's a lot of weight involved in what we do. And you don't hide behind corporate budgets. You don't hide behind finger pointing in politics. There's nowhere to hide, and so it's a really unpleasant experience many times for those few moments of true glory and success, and so I would say that is just be aware of that. Be aware that sometimes you got to keep your head down and keep going, and that you got to really cherish those moments when they come, because they'll be big, but they'll be brief, and they mean a lot, when they show up. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really about attaching if people can't answer the question, why would I buy that from Brian? They're not going to buy it, you know? And so I think that's a huge part of it. And if you answer a really good value prop, I think the selling becomes easier. It accelerates the growth trajectory. And you will find a couple of sponsors along the way that will offer you the credibility and the wherewithal to get there. The only other thing, I have a third thought here too, Marty, which is really capitalization. So, you know, capital funding is really difficult for small businesses. You know, there's funny stories out there about getting shot down by 30 banks and can't find a loan and this and that and the other. And I think that's a normal experience, you know. So if you've got a way to fuel your growth, to capitalize your growth, that's something good to put in place early on, because a really bad situation is to stumble upon these big growth opportunities and then not be able to fund it. And then you actually get the opposite of what you're shooting for, which is you lose credibility and you put your business at risk, you know. So probably those three things, you know. It's a tough experience. Find value in your product and maybe some sponsorship. And then, you know, worry about capitalization early on, you know, so that you can deal with that when those moments come.
Yeah, that I think those all three of them are good points. And what I like about it is I mentioned your street cred earlier, right? I mean, because of your resume, your bio, and the successes you've had, especially in the big company world. But really, what you just shared now, I think, is even more valuable street credibility, especially for at least the markets of the people that we serve and many of the people that will be in the audience to watch this interview. And so I think that is core to what everybody needs to remember. And you know, a big thing you talk about, you know, capitalization and the difference between understanding the P&L, the profit and loss statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statements, and how they all intermingle. They're not three separate independent statements. They all have to work together to make sure that they've got enough money to do the things that they want to do. So that is very wise advice. So thank you for that. So before we go, I guess just any other thoughts that you'd like to share that either about your background or that you think might be valuable for someone watching?
No, I mean, I think you know, what you and the Action Coach team are doing, Marty, I think is really important, by the way, because I talked earlier about mentors that I've had in my life, and it does mean a lot. These cycles of learning are really important, and if you can find ways to compress those cycles, you're going to be more successful quicker. And especially for entrepreneurs that just launch right into this lifestyle, you have to seek that out. And you don't have a natural rubbing point with mentors when you're out running your own business, frankly. And so whether it's Action Coach or something else, you know, I think it's really important that you go seek that out. You shore up some of the gaps. You talked about some of the financial acumen topics that someone like you or I probably picked up at big companies just along the way. But if you're 25 and launching a business, you didn't get that kind of knowledge. And so you got to find ways to get that. Mentoring, I think, is just hugely valuable. Education and self-awareness is always valuable. And so I would say, you know, that's really, really important. And then other than that, just make sure you have a passion for what you're doing, because, you know, the stuff we're talking about, like I said, you know, many, many moments in this journey are unpleasant. You know, people often don't read about them in the Wall Street Journal. They don't talk about them at cocktail parties. And so, you know, you got to find energy to keep going on the journey and get to the outcome. And if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, I mean, forget about being successful. You're just going to get eaten up. And I think a lot of businesses, they fall along the wayside because people are motivated by money, or they just think this is a quick get rich quick scheme or something like this. And 2 or 3 years later, I mean, they're just suffering, and, you know, they're working some job that they don't like because their business failed and they just didn't have this, you know, the fortitude to get through to the end. So I think those two things are probably my tips. You know, have a real passion and find, you know, some way to beat the cycles of learning or improve them. And along with some of the other stuff we talked about, I think if you do that, then you're increasing your odds of not only success, but just finding some happiness, you know?
Yeah, I think that's great. In fact, one of the quotes that I was writing down as you were sharing is, I love that. And I may ask your permission to quote you, and that's the cycles of learning. I love that because there are, for me, I've always felt like it was this way, but what you described is it's really more of a circular event or a series of events, I guess. And if that's the case, then that means we should be getting stronger with every one of those. And hopefully they're getting shorter and shorter too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to, at the time, a guy that was the CEO of Honeywell Aerospace. So this is somebody who was running at the time a $13 or $14 billion business, a really good leader. And I asked him one time, what do you look for in people you hire? And he said two things. Honeywell had a very structured, something called the Honeywell behaviors at the time, very structured view on what success looked like. And he picked out two of these 12 behaviors. One of them was getting results. And that has to do with credibility and integrity and things like this, delivering on what you say you're going to deliver. But the other one was self-awareness. And, if you leave this after watching this and you go and you really learn about self-awareness and what it takes, and you become self-aware, which has to do with owning your mistakes, being a lifelong learner, things like this. This one thing around self-awareness, I believe, makes people better human beings, but totally better business people, because every day you will take an inch, and this is where the cycles of learning concept comes from. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has opportunities. And if you're self-aware and you're just constantly driving towards knowledge and improvement, give it a year, give it 5 years, and you'll be light years ahead of the person sitting next to you right now who's not into that. So I think it's huge.
Yeah. Wow. A bunch of nuggets of wisdom and practical experience here. So just to be respectful of your time, thank you for joining us. But is there a way that the audience could reach you, either a website or your LinkedIn profile? What would be the best way for them to reach out to you if they have questions?
Yeah, a couple of ways. So, we've got a website. So the business is Janus Logistics Technologies, and our website is jltech.com. So if you go out there on the About Us page, you'll find my profile, which has a link to my LinkedIn profile. You're welcome to connect with me there. Also, you're welcome to drop me an email. I love networking. I love meeting people. And so my email address is my name, Brian, Brian, @jltech.com. And I'd welcome anybody and everyone who'd like to drop a note and either network or collaborate on a project or just talk about what's going on.
Sounds great. Well, thank you for that. Well, thank you so much, Brian. So everyone, just one last time, Brian Simons, founder and CEO of Janus Logistics Technologies. And what a great story. We were grateful that you took the time to share it with all of us. And we look forward to having people get in touch with you and get to know you better and your business too. And hopefully we're creating some community here with the audience and with you, and we can all grow as a result of this interview. So thank you again for joining us. Again, Marty Rasmussen from Action Coach. We look forward to seeing the audience in the future. And Brian, we thank you for joining us.
I appreciate the time, Marty, very much.